Hare Krishna. A very interesting topic that we're going to look into today. And of course, if you remember, we're on chapter 6, which is Jnana Yoga. Here we are in the process of meditation. And here Krishna is talking about the traditional form of meditation, Ashtanga Yoga. He talks about asanas, breath control, how to practice, where to practice in 47 verses. This is just an overview. So, unfortunately, I am not going over everything. And I'm just touching on some. But here is a qualification for whatever type of yoga you want to be. And of course, my main interest is Bhakti Yoga. And that's what we're here. We're teaching Bhakti Yoga from the Bhagavad Gita. And I'm going to read 2 verses today. Now, in the Gita, sometimes verses run into each other, and there's 2 ways that it's presented. Either the Sanskrit follows one after the other, and then there's a large translation, and there are certain sections where we've got 4, 5, 6 verses one after the other, and the other is where the translation follows after the Sanskrit verse, but the topic, the theme, it continues on, is a very consistent theme, and this is one such pair of verses like that. So this is verse 16 and 17 of the 6th chapter, and let me read the first verse. Krishna says, Nat yoshnanas tu yogosti nachaikantam anashnata nachati swapna shilasya jagrato naivacharjunaha. And he says, there's no possibility of one becoming a yogi, O Arjuna, if one eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough. What's the next verse? Okay. Yukta hara viharasya, yukta chaitasa karmasu, yukta swapnavabodasya, jogo bhavati dukkha. He who is regulated in his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. It's really fantastic, because Krishna here gives a life style guideline for what is the real foundation for our practice of Bhagavad Gita, for our practice of yoga. Bhagavad Gita means putting yoga into practice. And let me just go over some of these parts that Krishna is making here. But I think what's very important is to note that Krishna is not denying any of the basic human necessities of life, but he's saying they have to be done in moderation. Now, in Buddhism, that's called the middle path. Don't go to excess. Neither too little, neither too much of anything. Why not too little? And now what are the points that are being talked about? Eating, sleeping, recreation, and work. And then you can just extrapolate on further down. It can go much into all different types of things. But basically, an intelligent person will understand, okay, I've got to be balanced. I've got to be balanced, and I can't do too little. Now, why not too little? Because we're conditioned. In other words, we have needs. Unfortunately, we cannot just go gung-ho 100% into the practice of Bhakti Yoga because we're just not that advanced. It takes time. It's just like a 6-year-old child, first year in school, and he wants to be, say, he wants to be a doctor. Okay, you got to wait a long time before you get into medical school, what to speak of before you practice. You're going to have at least another 10 years to go to university, and then after that, you're going to have another 10 years before you get out of doctors go when they first just sort of practice, and after that, after another 20 years. And in the meantime, you have to deal with the reality that you need education, that you're limited, that you don't know things, that you got to mature, you got to grow up. So, if we deny the needs of the body, Patanjali also says this, other yoga texts speak about this, that to be in too austere situations, if the mind becomes too disturbed by that, the principle of yoga is not that I'm sitting there thinking how hard the floor is, or how hungry I am, I haven't eaten in 3 days. So for instance, this idea of eating too little. Krishna, there are some people who just live off prana, and they just live off air. Okay, it's a nice trick. It's got nothing to do with self-realization, and it's not approved. It's not approved by the yoga text to just eat too little. Eat. You should eat. And then on the other side is excess. Eat too much. Because the body's a machine. It's meant to be used according to how it's created, and it was not created in order to be stuffed full of food, in order to be sleeping 10, 12 hours a day. These things are all also unhealthy habits. Unhealthy habits are not good for yoga. We talked a little about eating, and we talked about sleeping. So some people sleep very little. Now, in one sense, if someone is very spiritually advanced, his sleeping will decrease. My spiritual master usually slept about 2-3 hours at night, and he took a nap during the day, and that was enough. It's not enough for me. I have to find my middle path, which is about 6 hours a day. Then he says, recreation. Now, very interesting. A yogi should do recreation. Yes. And even sport. Recreation means sport. Recreation doesn't mean go to the movies. Recreation means is that one should interact with other people. It's fine to be jovial, to have nice jokes and nice interaction with others. Sports, yeah. Swimming is one Vaishnav sport. I swim. I take long walks in terms of recreation. You also need to disconnect. You need to disconnect from that yoga, the intensity of sadhana or yoga practice, and just have the body move, because it's this body that you practice yoga with. It's this body that you need for bhakti. And if the body is not in good shape, if it's not in good condition, then you won't be able to concentrate your mind on proper practice of chanting Hare Krishna mantra and so on. And then it says work. Krishna recognizes that we have to work. Everyone has to do some work. What I'm doing right now, this is part of my work, and I have other types of work. But life should not be all about just working. Life is about personal development and personal cultivation. So people should not overwork. And what does that mean? That means that we have to recognize what is my karma, and how by a maximum of 8 hours work a day, and if I can do less, then that's even better. What standard of life do I have? And I accept that. My neighbor may be able to have a much higher standard. Well, if he has a much higher standard, he won't be your neighbor. He'll be living somewhere else. You'll be living in a little apartment house, and they'll be living in some gated community. Doesn't matter. But my pursuit is not about living in a gated community. My pursuit is that I have enough to supply the basic necessities of life, to follow the middle path as it's being described here, and to be able to then develop internally, because that's what my life is really all about. Can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. So all material pains means that you'll have a reasonable life, a reasonable lifestyle. It's impossible to be painless, but at least you won't unnecessarily cause yourself difficulty, and that will make yoga very practicable. And these are the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. So please read this book. It's a wealth of transcendental knowledge. And all you need is this book to become self-realized. For those of you who are watching, and if you don't have, we have a web shop where the Bhagavad Gita can be acquired, and not just the Bhagavad Gita, but also the beads for chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Please, when we're talking about just practicing, really have to start dedicating. If you haven't, you have to start dedicating certain quality time every day, reading Bhagavad Gita and chanting Hare Krishna. There's some minimal things that you require, paraphernalia for that. Please acquire those. They're available from the web shop. And take life seriously, because now, as we see with this pandemic, life is very, very risky, like a drop of water on the edge of a leaf. It could fall at any moment.